Hi guys, in this video I explain selection sort. Now let's define a prototype named selection sort. This expects an array of integers and the size of the array. Now it simply sorts the elements in the array, so there's nothing to return. I also define a prototype named print that prints out an integer array. It also expects the array and the size of the array. Now let's implement the print function. So it simply outputs a square opening bracket followed by the first element. And then for the remaining elements, it always puts a comma and the element. And then it outputs a closing square bracket at the end. Now let's implement selection sort. Now before we can implement it, we have to understand how this works. So let's enter some random values here. 83, 23, 54, 45, 67, and 94. And we have the index for each of these. So 0, 1, 3, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So the way selection sort works, it looks at the first element and then finds any smaller element in the remaining array. So for 81, it would find 23 as smaller. So it would swap 23 and 81. Now it checks 23 to 54, then 23 to 45, 23 to 67, and 23 to 91. So 23 was the smallest array that was found. Now it increments the index to the next element. It looks at 81 and then finds the smallest one in the array for 81. Then looks at the position 2 and finds the smallest one for 2. So let's swap some values here. 93, 23, and maybe here 31. And let's see what we need. So we definitely need a loop with I, and I starts at index 0. So I is the position where I'm finding the smallest element 4 in the array. So initially I find it for index 0 in the remaining array, then I find it for index 1 in the array, then for 2 in the remaining array, and 3, 4, 5. So this is a simple for loop starting at index 0, I less than size, I plus plus. Now how can I create a loop for the remaining elements? So when I is 0, I want the remaining elements from starting at 1, right? Later, when I is 1 and I search the smallest value for index 1, I want the remaining loop start at 2. When it's 2, I want the remaining loop to start at index 3. So it always I plus 1. So here I have 4 int k equals I plus 1, k less than the size, and k plus plus. So here I also have a k. And initially it will be I plus 1, so we'll start at 1. Now what I want to do here is I want to compare the value in the array at k to the value at I, right? I want to compare, is 81 smaller than 92? This is the case, then I would swap it. So here I write if array at k is smaller than array at I. Now I just mentioned this is the case, so I create a temporary variable, temp, and in temp I store array at k. So array at k will be my 81. Next, I will have an assignment. Array at I will be assigned to array at k. So we'll take I is my 92, and assign it to k. Now they're both 92. And then at the end, I assign array temp being assigned to array at I. So temp is 81 assigned to array at I. And then I swap the two. Now I increment k by 1 and check Is array at k smaller than array at I? So array at k 54 is smaller than 84. So I store array at k in my temp variable. Then I assign array at I to array at k. And then I assign the temp back to array at I. And so I swap the two. Now I increment k by 1. And then I compare array at k, which is 45, to array at I. 45 is smaller than 54. So I assign array at k to my temp variable. Then here I take the value at I, which is 54, and I assign it to array at k. And then I take my temp variable and assign it to array at I. I increment k. K again is smaller, so I take array at k, store it in the temp variable. Take array at I, that's the 45, assign it to array at k. It's this statement here. And then the last statement, take array at temp and assign it to array at I. And I increment k. Array at k 23 is smaller than 31. So I store 23 in the temp variable, copy array at I to array at k, and then take the temp variable and assign it to array at I. So this was the first iteration. Now this loop ends, goes back to the outer loop, and increments I by 1. And then starts with a nested loop, k I plus 1. Now it compares these two again, right? This one is smaller than this, so it will swap the two. Do this a little bit faster here. Then increments k. K again smaller than 81, so it swaps the two. Then goes 45. 45 smaller than 54, swaps these two. And 31 smaller than 45, and it swaps these two as well. And so it reached the end, and then it will go to the next element here, increment I, and now finds the smallest one for this position. 81 is smaller than 91, swaps the two. Don't have my k here. There we go. Increments k, swaps these two, and then swaps these two. And then essentially it goes next element, does the remaining one, next element, the remaining one, and finally the next element. And when we're done with going through all the elements with I, that's when the array is sorted. So let's take an example here. Let's say we create an array of 5 values. It's an integer array. I call this numbers, and I have 5 values. So it's 20. So let's take actually 93, 82, 23, 54, and 69. Now I call my print function first. I output the numbers. Then I call selection sort, pass in my numbers to that. And then I call the print function again with the numbers and the size. And I run this. And here first it outputs the values that I declared, and then we see 23, 54, 69, 81, and 91. So it sorted all the values. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.